this false start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, Jon Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. As you can see, I am flying solo like a cup with Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com, out there somewhere in Colorado doing Lord of the Rings stuff with the NC State podcast. Love is love, and we gotta respect that here. But got an exciting show for you guys today here. Try to be in and out very quickly. Gonna do this before Georgia plays Mississippi State for its final SEC regular season game. Hopefully Georgia's a lock to make the tournament, because otherwise I'll be really sad. But on that note, be sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, give this thing a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. It really helps the show grow. So without further ado, let's get started with our first and 15 today with a joint topic here with That's My Quarterback and Goldilocks. ESPN's Bill Connelly put together his list of the power ranking every quarterback in the Power Four plus Notre Dame. So we're looking at what, 68 players, if you will. And I had a bone to pick with a few of them. And again, like, he's got to start somewhere. He's very analytical. The guy loves the deep ball more than I love the Arizona State podcast. It's just the way it goes for him. But he power ranks some quarterbacks here, and I'm gonna read off who they've got in the top 20. And then I'm going to probably talk about who's in the top 15 because I wrote a few of them around the network for various sites, Fly War Eagle, Storm and Norman, Dawn of the Dog, Death Valley Voice. Maybe I did another one. I'm not mistaken, but I definitely wrote about those four. So here's effectively who Bill Connelly, yeah, I was blanking on his name, has in his top 20. Number one, he's got Notre Dame Fighting Irish quarterback CJ Carr. Two, Ohio State Buckeyes quarterback Julian Sayin. Three, Ole Miss Rebels quarterback Trinidad Chambliss. Four, Texas Longhorns quarterback Arch Manning. Five, USC Trojans quarterback Jaden Maiava. Six, Oregon Ducks quarterback Dante Moore. Seven, Oklahoma State Cowboys quarterback Drew Mestemaker. Eight, Georgia Bulldogs quarterback Gunnar Stockton. Nine, Texas Tech Red Raiders quarterback Brendan Sorsby. 10, Auburn Tigers quarterback Byron Brown. Okay, and that's your top 10. And then 11 through 20. 11, you've got Miami Hurricanes quarterback Darian Mensah. 12, you got Utah Utes quarterback Devin Dampier. 13, Indiana Hoosiers quarterback Josh Hoover. 14, LSU Tigers quarterback Sam Levitt. 15, BYU Cougars quarterback Bear Bachmeier. And then 16 through 20, North Carolina State quarterback CJ Bailey. Michigan Wolverines quarterback Bryce Underwood at 17. Marcel Reed at 18 out of Texas A&M, John Mateer 19 out of Oklahoma, and cousin Damon Williams at 20 out of Washington. So again, I wrote about this kind of for John Mateer, him being pretty low here. And again, I'm not going to touch on Bailey, Underwood, Reed, Mateer, or Williams all that much. I'm really focused on the top 15 here. So again, I've got 5 guys in the top 15 that I think are too hot, 5 that are too cold, 5 that I think are just right. So let's get started with too hot. I'm gonna shoot from the hip here. I think CJ Carr at 1's insane. And I think Julian Sand at 2 is either just right or maybe just a tinge too hot. What has CJ Carr done to this point at his Notre Dame career? He's handed the ball off to Jeremiah Love a bunch. You went 10-2 last year. Didn't really beat anybody of note, didn't make the playoff. You've got a cupcake schedule for the most part this year. I understand that you were a blue chipper coming out of high school and your granddad is Lloyd Carr of Michigan fame, but I'm kind of speechless that he's number one. It's just kind of like, who's he doing it against? There was nothing I saw last year that led me to believe he's the best quarterback in college football. I have him in the top 10 because I think otherwise that'd be too much, but number one's insane. Julian saying it too, that's probably closer to being right, but I think he benefited tremendously from playing at Ohio State. I think when you're surrounded by as much talent as he is in Columbus, that's significant. You do have Jeremiah Smith, who's the best wide receiver in college football. I do think you upgraded offensive coordinator going from Brian Hartline to Arthur Smith, and Ryan Day is still your head coach. And I'm bullish on saying to have a great year this year. Again, he's the only Heisman finalist returning back to school. If he plays up to his potential, he could be a first round pick, no doubt, probably top 10 or so, maybe even the first quarterback taken in all honesty. But like there were moments last year where I saw when he was facing really good competition, he kind of shrank. He did that versus Indiana and he did that versus Miami back to back. Maybe he'll grow from it, but I can't definitively have him at two. And again, not by much. I'd probably have him at three or four. And I think that's fair. Five, Jade Mayava. I think that's a little bit too high as well. I'm good with him being in the top 10, but he seems to be doing a lot when no one's looking. I think when there's a lot of attention on him, he's not the same player. But again, I will say though, I think that he abides by the necessary blue collar ethos that makes USC good when USC is good. Like we've kind of gotten back to like the Baker Mayfield era of Oklahoma football under Lincoln Riley, as opposed to like, what we saw with Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams. And then, basically those two quarterbacks, Kyler Murray a little bit as well. Maeva just kind of seems to fit what makes USC special. Again, I don't necessarily know what his NFL ceiling is. Granted, I don't watch a whole lot of him. I think he's a really good player, but I think five's a little bit high. I'd probably have him about seven or eight. Final two that I have too hot on, I think I've got Drew Mestamaker and Byron Brown. And I'm going to group them both together here for this reason. These are guys that carved it up in the American, with Mestamaker at North Texas and Byron Brown there at South Florida. They're going Power Four now. Mestamaker's taking over at Oklahoma State, and Byron Brown's going to Auburn. They both followed their head coaches, Eric Morris and Alex Golesh, respectively, to these Power Four schools. And again, I think they will have success. But I think there's something to be had with Mestamaker being a zero-star recruit out of high school and Byron Brown, I mean, just kind of being a G6 superstar. I think that both of these teams are certainly capable of making a bowl game, but like, look, I don't see either of them taking the Pokes or the Tigers to the playoff. Like, I would be stunned if either of those teams won 9 games. If they, it's probably more likely that they win a combined 9 games than one of them wins nine. Again, like, I think that they're good, but like, level of competition here, I think amps up here. And I think the big thing, I kind of group these two together. Like, I think it's going to be challenging for Eric Morris their first year in the Big 12. And I think Alex Golesh will eventually have success there at Auburn, but that's not an easy job. You got to ask yourself, is Oklahoma State better with mostly North Texas players than what they had the last couple of years under Mike Gundy? I think that's debatable. That's possible. But I think with Byron Brown coming over from South Florida, like you're you're assuming that the guys in Tampa are better than what Auburn had. I don't think that that's the case. I think there was a lot of untapped potential that eventually left for other programs, and that's going to come back to bite Auburn in the ass. And I also kind of feel like, look, if these two teams were that good, they would have won the American. Tulane won it. Tulane won it with Garrett with Garrett Retzlaff, uh, Jake Retzlaff at quarterback and Jon Sumrall. Like that was the year for them to do it. Well, that was not the best Tulane team I've ever seen. So yeah, I think Connelly's too hot on Carr, Sand, Mayava, Mestamaker, and Brown. Too cold. I think he's too cold on Dante Moore at six. Look, if that's the case, and he thinks that Dante Moore has stuff to improve on, and again, I wrote about this for Odds and Zoo, then maybe that ranking is justified. But right now, he's probably my favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. Had he have turned pro, he would have been the second overall pick by the Jets. And if the Jets were enamored with Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Reuben Bain Jr., David Bailey, you name it, then he's going to go three to the Cardinals. And I think Connolly wrote about this in his article that like I I found it very interesting. He's like, look, I think Moore recognizes that there's room to grow, and maybe there is. I don't think Dante Moore has a lot of starts. He started all of last year, I think about 5 or 6 games a couple years ago at UCLA, but that was UCLA in the final year of Chip Kelly. Um, I think, staying in Oregon where you're going to be playing for Drew Maringer as opposed to Will Stein, who's now at Kentucky, and then Chris Hampton's promoted from within as well on defense, replacing Tosh Lapoy. Again, I'm starting to learn their names, which is good. But I think that serves Dante Moore. Like people know who Oregon is, people know who Dante Moore is, and they know who Dan Lanning is. And if Oregon plays up to like their potential and gets to like the semifinals again, I mean, you could be looking at a Heisman candidate here. I'd probably have him in the top three or four. Like I think six is too low. Gunnar Stockton at eight is insane. Look, I know he's my guy. I know I'm a Georgia guy, and I know he's kind of got like a flawed game in the eyes of Bill Connelly. Like this is the closest thing we've seen in the SEC to Cam Newton. Look, I don't think Stockton's ever going to really have a great deep ball. He's getting better as a passer. He's showing he can layer it. And Connolly's like ripping him like he throws the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Like that's just to get the ball in a Zachariah Branch's hands, and that worked out. I think Georgia's strength this year as a team is going to be running the football, with Nate Frazier, with Chauncey Bowens, with Dante Dowdle coming over from Kentucky. Offensive line's going to be really strong. Yeah, you lose Micah Morrison, namely Monroe Freeling to the NFL, but Drew Bobo and others remain. I also think that Stockton just he knows the system like the back of his hand. Mike Boba's father, Drew Boba's granddad, was his quarterback's coach growing up and everything like that. So I would probably have Stockton like in the top five, probably no higher than four. But like I think what we saw out of him, like we're talking about a guy who finished in the top 10 of the Heisman Trophy. And again, he is the only guy in the top 10 right now who won his conference a year ago. Like let that sink in. Like he won an SEC. I mean, nobody else in that list did. A lot of these guys didn't even play at the Power Four levels. That's just bonkers to me. I think Connolly's too cold on Darian Minshew at 11. I'd probably have him in the top 10. I'd probably knock down Byron Brown and Drew Mestemaker. Probably have Minshew somewhere in the 8-9 range, I would say. Again, he's been successful everywhere he's been, whether that was at Tulane previously, whether that was at Duke last year. He's coming into Miami. He was handpicked to be the replacement to Carson Beck, who was the handpicked to replace Cam Ward, who replaced Tyler Van Dyke. And like Mince's got a lot of money coming over there. He brings with him Cooper Barkate. But you also have Mark Fletcher Jr. coming back. You've got Malachi Tony outside. Shannon Dawson's back. This is good. Even though Duke didn't have the best record, they still won the ACC. And that had been in the new playoff format, they would have made it. So maybe we're getting a little bit too carried away with the hype of Darian Mensah, but it does. I feel like his talent certainly merits being in the top 10. Like I'd put him in over Brown and Mestermaker because at least I've seen him play at a Power Four level and win his conference. A lot of these guys haven't done that yet. Devin Dampier at 12, I think is too low as well. I'd probably have him closer to 10. Again, he made the move to the Power Four and he tore it up there for Utah. Had they have won Holy War, maybe they're in the mix of playing Texas Tech for a Big 12 title. I do think that them pivoting off of Kyle Whittingham in favor of Morgan Scalley at head coach is going to be problematic, probably regrettable. But Devin Dampier is kind of like what like Lenora Sellers was a couple of years ago. Um, it would not shock me if Utah won the Big 12 and he's contending for the Heisman Trophy. Like I know I've said that about Cam Rising. I didn't even play that one year. But there's just something about the Utah football culture that I think can get the most out of his talent, and I like to see what he does. And then I think Sam Levitt at 14 is a little bit too cold as well. Probably have him closer to like 11 or 12 or something like that. The talent's there. And I wrote about this the other day for Death Valley Voice. The big issues for him were injuries and character concerns because he certainly burned some bridges on the way out of Tempe. Again, this is his third school he's played for in the Power Four in college. Initially, he was a Michigan State guy. Then he played Arizona State. Now he's going to LSU. He's going to need to lean on Lane Kiffin. Like they need each other to kind of overcome the disdain they kind of have, people have for them across the board. Like, look, I'm marrying a girl with Arizona State. We saw Sam Levitt play really well at the Peach Bowl 2 years ago. Can't say I'm actually rooting for LSU because I'm not, but I would be kind of surprised if LSU is not playoff viable this year. Frankly, that's why Kiffin left. That's why Levitt left. They want to get back to it. They got to make it happen. I have him a little bit higher. And then just right, I would have Trinidad Chambliss, Arch Manning, Brendan Sorsby, Josh Hoover, and Bear Bachmeyer. Touch on Trinidad Chambliss here in just a second in the next topic, but he's small, he's older, but he just makes things happen behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, he beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Went toe to toe with Georgia between the hedges for a while. Only lost to what Georgia and Miami this year. Like this is a great player. I do kind of wonder what happens with the coaching attrition with so many people following Lane Kiffin to LSU. How much does Pete Golding actually retain? Look, I think Chambliss being older serves him, and I think he's had a plenty of starting experience, whether that's at Ole Miss or previously, at Ferris State. I feel like I felt it was interesting that he wanted to come back so badly. I'm like, I saw on tape, like, or on film, like, this is a guy that, like, I think could be a first round talent. Maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe I'm seeing this through rose-colored glasses. I think he's a special player. Arch Manning at 4, I'm okay with that. Like the talent's there. The production was great there towards the end of the season. He got better as the year progressed. I would expect Texas to make the playoff next year. They could beat Georgia. I'm not counting on it, but he knows Steve Sarkisian's offense. This is going to be the fourth year he's been there, and he needs to make it happen because look, they put a lot of blame on Pete Kwiatkowski on defense. They bring in Will Muschamp to hopefully make it better, but like Manning, Sark, and AJ Milwee, for love of God, need to make it happen. I'm not going to crown and say Arch Manning is going to win the Heisman or anything like that because nobody in his family did or win a national championship, but he's going to be in the mix for it for sure if Texas has a season they're capable of. Sorsby coming over from Cincinnati. I think he was initially at Indiana too, going to Texas Tech. If he's a massive upgrade over Baron Morton, that's huge for the Red Raiders, Joe McGuire, and their potential chances of advancing further in the playoff. Didn't win a game a year ago, but like, I mean, we saw Indiana win a national championship. Would it honestly stun you if Texas Tech did out of the Big 12? I'm a little dubious of it because I don't think the schedule is super tough, but look, Clemson won stuff in a very down ACC. I mean, they could do it. I think Sorsby has the potential to win the Heisman Trophy and be one of the best players in Texas Tech football history. He's got something there that I'm very intrigued by. I'm glad to see Josh Hoover there at I'm glad to see Josh Hoover there at 13. The hype was getting insane. Again, this is a guy who played in the Big 12 at TCU and he was fine, but like Max Duggan did more with less talent than him. And everybody keeps thinking that he's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread or since Fernando Mendoza. That's just an impossible spot for him. He's probably going to be closer to Curtis Rourke than Fernando Mendoza, and that's not to disparage Curtis Rourke, but like Mendoza did something that's I've never quite seen before in my 36 years of life covering and watching college football. Um, I maybe you could put him in the top 10, but like he was like third in Heisman like odds. That's insane. I don't see that, don't understand that, don't get it. And then Bear Bachmeier at 15, a young player, kind of a run first, more kind of guy, very tough. Did he played very well for his age. Look, I know him as the younger brother of Hank Bachmeier and everything like that. I think he came over from Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. But BYU is going to be a beast. I'm very intrigued by them, so that's kind of what I feel about that. So yeah, that's my Goldilocks. That's my quarterback for the first segment of the day. And on that note, let's talk about some more Trinidad Chambliss here with our second topic with Pat the Doc. The NCAA wants to mess with his eligibility again. Like, what are we doing? Like, I think the NCAA is like, again, I don't do legalese very well. It just bores me to tears. Basically, what I am gathering out of this for Trinidad Chambliss is the NCAA is like, you know what? We want to like appeal the injunction that will allow Chambliss to play in 2026. Look, this is Cody was kind of more or less doing the episode when this initially broke and it ruled his favor. Apparently, he had like, you know, some sort of medical condition where like he only played 2 games and had to miss the year, but the paperwork was not filed properly, or I think the ruling by the Oxford judge says like, yeah, you kind of or the rural Mississippi place where they did this acted in bad faith. Here's my thought. I don't want to spend a whole hell of a lot of time on this with this. The combine's come and gone. Like, unless you want to put him in the supplemental draft, which that'd be odd. You're better off. We're at this point of time. Again, we're talking. I mean, I'm doing this like mid-afternoon, March 7th on a Saturday. This could be on Monday because this is when I can record it. The point is like he's spring ball's here, man. Like this year's about to start. Like on Monday or something like that. It's going to be the new NFL league year. The draft's coming up. And look, Ole Miss doesn't have like a solution. I think they got like Deuce Snyder or whatever in the portal. I don't know. I don't honestly remember. But like, if you have Trinidad Chambliss back at Ole Miss, what that does for the Rebels is it keeps them viable, at least in the conversation, of potentially making the playoff. And if that's the case, then that's good for the team. Because if not, like that could be a massive regression candidate. And we're talking about an Ole Miss team that wins like 6 or 7 games. And we wonder if they made the right call going forward with Pete Golding. I think that they did. I think he kind of feels very Mississippi here. But like, why are we playing with our food and all this? Why is the NCAA try to mess with this so much? I don't get it. I don't understand it. This isn't what I would do. You lost. I'd get the next one. It's like you have like a toothless bite at this point, and all you're gonna do is just make Ole Miss and everything mad. Like as a Georgia fan, Georgia alum, Georgia's path to a national championship is probably easier if Trinidad Chambliss isn't in the SEC. But if he is, then that makes, anytime Georgia plays them, I think they play at Vaught Hemingway later. And again, I'll finish up the show talking about that a little bit more. But like when you have Chambliss in the SEC, that's better for your product. Let me put it this way, it makes every Ole Miss game intriguing and you got to watch it. If he's that good, he can overcome a lot of the issues that may be existing with roster and coaching attrition. Like if he's back, Ole Miss can win 9 or 10 games. And if that's the case, then they're playoff viable. If not, like you said, like winning 6 or 7 games, you're talking about probably a 3+ win difference if Trinidad Chambliss is playing quarterback for the Ole Miss Rebels. I think it's better for the sport if he's here. And I think like, look, I want to have more good games. The SEC is going to a 9 game conference schedule. It's going to be more of a bloodbath than ever before, but I think having him here is good. And again, I don't understand why the NCAA is trying to like mess with this. Like you already lost. You were already proven in a court of law that you acted in bad faith with him when he was at Ferris State. Granted, they did this hearing in rural Mississippi based on something that happened in a state far, far away. But for the most part, I'll just say like we got to have him in this league. We got to have him here because like college football is better right now if Trinidad Chambliss is playing. Maybe the NFL draft will be better. Wherever he's going will be better. But this is a college football show. We want to have him here and around. So no real reason to mess around with that too much. I think it's just mind-boggling that the NCAA is trying to go back in that direction. And on that note, I'm going to ask myself a question. Let's do some do Host or do Host here. Do Host or do Host? Does Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese being a positionless guy, does that hurt his draft stock? And again, I wrote about this for Scarlet and Game, and I'm going to go do Haas 2 S's. I don't think that it does. And here's why. Look, the consensus mock draft that I've seen across the board has him going 2 to the Jets. Everybody and the brother is taking Fernando Mendoza 1 at the Raiders. And this is not the best draft. This is not a really good draft. This is a good draft if you need like maybe some receiver depth. Maybe you need offensive line depth. Maybe you need an edge rusher. This is not good for quarterbacks, running backs, whatever. There's not a lot of star potential with this draft. And this happens. I mean, this happens every couple of years. Maybe this is the worst draft in probably about 8 or 10 years. That's kind of how it goes. I don't think it matters for a couple of reasons. And again, I wrote about this for Scarlet and Game. You can definitely check that out. Ryan Standard does a good job running that site. One of the comps that I think I have for Arvell Reese coming out is Jalen Walker out of Georgia with my Atlanta Falcons. I watch Jalen Walker a lot, both college and pro. You can line him up anywhere. He's a Swiss Army knife. He's kind of a jack of all trades. Look, James Pierce Jr. had more sacks than him a year ago, but that's kind of all he did and will ever do with the Falcons. That's another story for another time. But like they look at Walker as like a team leader. They look at him as like a Swiss Army knife. They look at him as being deployable everywhere, making every offensive coordinator the Falcons go up against to have to account for him. I think Reese could potentially provide that to some degree for the whoever takes them. And I think like because Walker's had success, and look, the game's changing. You know, it's become very passing centric over time, but I think people are starting to take advantage of that a little bit more at the ground. So I think having a linebacker who could do a lot. And again, Ohio State's one of the best schools in the country at developing linebackers. I would say Georgia, Penn State, you name it. There's other ones up there that do a fantastic job at Alabama, what have you. Like, then you also have the Jets part of it all too. Like I said earlier, if Dante Moore would have declared, they would have taken him at number 2 and wouldn't have wasted any other time with it. But because the Jets are just a dysfunctional team, They got to get more good players, and they got to get players who can make an impact and set the tone for the organization. I believe Reese could do that. Also, like maybe they don't want him. Maybe they prefer David Bailey. Maybe they prefer his teammate Sonny Styles. Maybe they want Ruben Van Jr. Well, do you think the Arizona Cardinals or Tennessee Titans are going to pass them up picking at 3 and 4? No, they're going to take advantage of the Jets making something stupid, making a bad decision here. And then I also think there's other stuff too. I mentioned Sonny Styles. He's kind of more of like a safety who's kind of moved up, kind of more of your star sort of player. You also have another Georgia linebacker in CJ Allen in this draft, and people know him. He has a little bit of an injury history. He's probably more of your stand-up linebacker. And again, in the past, that's been a position group that has been devalued over time. But because he's productive, but because he'll test well and interview well, his stock will rise. And if that's LB3 and you're looking at the guy potentially going, what, 15 to the Bucks because they need a Levante David replacement, then that's going to move Styles probably up to the Commanders picking in just inside the top 10. And that'll move Reese up, inside the top five, probably, like I said, probably going to the Jets here. I don't think I've watched enough football, and again, like NFL is way more schematic than me. I don't do X's and O's. Again, I never play it. I just watch and comment on it. If you have a guy that can do a lot of things and be valuable and impactful on the field, you're going to play him. I mean, look at Taysom Hill's career. I can't believe that's still going on with the Saints. I mean, maybe that's Stockholm syndrome. Maybe he knows things. But when you have a guy that can, when your athleticism fades, you can still find a way to make an impact. That's when your career goes from 6 or 7 years to like 10 or 12. And I think with the Jets, like, look, also if you don't take him, I was picking at 5. That'd be the Giants. That would look really bad if he becomes like, he's playing opposite of Abdul Carter there, and the other locker room for East Rutherford. And that makes you look really stupid. Look, Aaron Glenn's, I can't believe he's back as a head coach here. Look, Darren Muji's going to probably get to be part of another regime once this Aaron Glenn stuff inevitably fails. Um, but I'm just thinking like from a Jets perspective, they may want to get a different guy, but I don't think it's going to be they're going to move off Reese because like we can't peg him to a position. Like you're picking second. You don't have like a leg to stand on. There is no point in doing that. You have a roster full of crap. And the best way to get better is to draft players who are better than pretty much everybody else in their league, in their conference, in the sport. And when you have players like that come in there and can do a multitude of things, like we're talking like a wide receiver who can block, a running back who can block, who can pass catch, a quarterback who can scramble a little bit, a tight end who can block, defensive back who can tackle, a linebacker who's got a knack for getting the football, edge rusher who can stuff the run. If you got a player who can do multiple things in multiple spots, that makes them more valuable. And if you're the Jets, like you can't like the Falcons are happy to have Walker. And I'll just say like I know the Panthers got Tetairoa McMillan and the Saints got Kelvin Banks, and maybe they're happy with those picks. But like you don't want to have you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you make a critical error on the draft board and the guy you should have taken goes like a couple spots behind you, goes to somebody, in conference, in city, God forbid in division. That'd be problematic here. So Duhas, two S's, I don't think it matters, but like the Jets are going to do whatever they're going to do because they're the Jetty effing Jets, and that's what I got to say about that. Let's move on to our second half of our show here with Always Be Cruton. Miami and Mario Cristobal really made their mark in Florida after 305 day. And again, 305 March 5th, I think that's the area code for Miami. That would have been on Thursday. Big recruiting day. They got local product, Nick Lanier to sign. They had a lot of other guys come in there, and then they got people coming to see spring practice. I read a lot more about recruitment than I probably talk about on the show. It's just an easy thing. You basically kind of follow along with it. And it's not really necessarily built for this show because it's too granular. Again, this is a more national based show, and most of our writing for FanSided in the NCAA division is more tied to like team specific things. So yeah, it'll play very well with Miami, but like we're not going to really talk about this, but I'm talking about this today for two reasons. One, Cody's not here and I can do whatever the hell I want. And two, it's a trend that I'm seeing very much for the positive there in South Florida under Mario Cristobal and everything like that. What you have to understand is just the state of things in the state of Florida. Look, Miami hasn't won the ACC since they joined the ACC over 2 decades ago, but they did play for a national championship last year. They're a serious contender for it this year. I'd be stunned if they didn't win the ACC next year. I'd be probably more stunned if they didn't make the playoff. They do well enough recruiting out of the portal to get guys, like Cam Ward from Washington State or Carson Beck from Georgia after briefly entering the NFL draft. It's the same sort of thing that Ward did out of Washington State. And then they waited a very long time to get Mensa out of Duke because that was so late in the transfer portal cycle. So maybe they're like the last mover in all this. Anyway, I think that like with Cristobal having played at Miami, being from Miami, having played at Cristobal Columbus High School, he knows the region. He understands the blueprint of what makes Miami special. And look, he's been very reluctant and very reticent to call it the U again because he knows what that means. But he also knows like he just has total buy-in from everybody in the community because he's one of them. Like, and one of the reasons I think Cody and I have really come around to Mario Cristobal in the last year or so is I think he's just very, very good, very loquacious at the podium. And for a guy who's never going to call plays because he's the offensive line coach and a recruiter, you got to be able to conduct yourself in a way in front of a microphone, in front of a camera, to be like the perfect mouthpiece for your team. And look, that's kind of an issue a lot of times with guys who just call plays. Like they're a little more introverted. They're not going to be confrontational. They're not going to be able to answer things so eloquently. Defensive minded guys are a little more loud, a little more cocky. They don't really care. Their job is to blow stuff up. But when you got like the offensive lineman and the CEO type here, the message comes across very consistently and very frequently. You also have some issues kind of going on there in the state. Look, Florida made a transition. Billy Napier is not working. He did not work. They moved on. They hired Jon Sumrall away from Tulane. I'll touch on Jon Sumrall a little bit later in the show as well. But like Sumrall is a threat. And I also know that Mike Norvell over there in Tallahassee at Florida State, like he's got to win this year. He's calling plays. Gus Malzahn retired. Uh, I'm blanking on the new offensive coordinator there at Florida State, but he's not play caller. He's more of a receivers coach. But I mean that's the position that Norvell played. That's the position that Malzahn played, and this is false start. But then you also have the Scott Frost of it all there in Orlando at UCF. You got South Florida, which is near enough, a G6 program. Brian Hartline's taking over. He's more of a wide receivers coach, kind of sort of call plays, could recruit at Ohio State. Don't really know if that's going to work. And then Golish is obviously on to Auburn. So Miami's in a very interesting spot where they're strong and powerful. Somebody of that crew, somebody of that group, maybe South Florida, like took advantage of the fact that Florida was down, Florida State was down, UCF was down. But one of those three other schools who's in the Power Four is going to turn around relatively quickly. I would venture to guess it's probably going to be Florida because they've hit the reset button sooner. With UCF, they're living in the past with Scott Frost, and Florida State just doesn't have any money. And it sucks for them right now. I'm not expecting a whole hell of a lot out of the Noles. They'll be a bowl caliber team, whereas Florida's going to win about 7 or 8 games. UCF probably bowl caliber too. Miami's a national title contender. So when you're able to do like a recruiting event centered around, like local stuff. Look, they had guys coming in, like I think Elijah Kimball came down from Buffalo. Like when you're like 404 day, like in Atlanta or Athens or something like that, if you wanted to hone in on that, like a recruiting sort of thing, that works out well for your calendar because spring practice is right here. So effectively, you're getting like multiple visits in a row. Like you're getting people like in the more on the public consciousness of like, I want to go play for Miami. This is cool. Also, you look at Kimball, coming down from like Buffalo. He experiencing amazing weather there in South Florida on March 5th. I mean, as opposed to shoveling snow up there in Western New York. Like this, that's how it goes here. But as I'm following along with some of the recruiting stuff going on, it just feels like this thing's starting to really build upon itself there in Miami. Look, I write a lot about the recruiting for Michigan with Kyle Whittingham, and he's trying to plant seeds, but he's also got those West Coast ties from his decade, 2 decades there running point at Utah. But you still got to make up time and building rapport and stuff with people in Michigan and the Midwest. As a 65-year-old, it's tough. But I would say like Mario Cristobal, having been from Miami, having been at Miami, having won at Miami, like this is like, you're stacking assets here. You're reinvesting your dividends. You're scaling very quickly here. Yeah, you could pocket that and do whatever you want. You could probably put that in another asset, but you're putting it all into one thing, and that thing is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And I think like that's kind of like we've gotten to that point there with Cristobal at Miami, where it's Georgia under Kirby Smart. Where like you're at your alma mater. I don't think you really have any NFL aspirations, really. This is your dream job. You're at a traditional power. You can win national championships. Just go for it. But obviously, it's a very high stakes, very high profile job. Not everyone's built for it, but I think he is. And I think when you have a coach who played there, who's a good player there, but not a great player, the great players respect the hell out of that. I mean, you look at the guys all across the board who just rave about Kirby Smart and everything like that. They do the same thing with Mario Cristobal. That's why they're two of the four best coaches in college football. I would say Cristobal is probably four. I go Kirby one, Chris Day two, Ryan Day three, Mario Cristobal number four. That's who I probably got on my Mount Rushmore right now. And I guess like just tie bonus with 305 day with Miami. Like this, they're going to be good for a while. And I think what's important is they got to start getting a little more local too, particularly at quarterback, because at some point, one of these guys they bring in here out of the transfer portal is not going to hit. And we've seen what happens when you go portal heavy and you don't succeed. That ultimately cost Brian Kelly his job at LSU. Outside of Mansour Deland, LSU didn't hit really on any other transfer portal pickups. Granted, Garrett Nussmeier didn't play in there, but like live by the portal, die by the portal. Not everybody can be Lane Kiffin. But I will say that Mario Cristobal does a better job of it than most because he's a people person. He's an offensive line coach. And more importantly, he is Miami. And on that note, let's get on to our penultimate topic here with It Don't Mean Enough. I wrote about this for Hail Florida Hail earlier in the week, but Jon Sumrall is not a patient man. And there's a chance that that might actually be problematic for him in Florida. Look, spring practice just started late last week in Gainesville. Weather's good, new head coach. You want to get this thing going as quickly as you possibly can. And Summerall, this might have been a post practice media discussion. He may have said this with a JD Pickell of On Three, but he's doing the rounds. He's speaking. He's talking. He's talking about stuff. And I paraphrase the quote because I don't have it up right now. He says like, I think it was with JD Pickell in honesty. I think like he said like, I don't think our roster's where it needs to be. You got to put in the work in their weight room. We're gonna make the best of it. But let's be real, I'm not a patient man. I want to win right now. And he was able to do that at Troy and Tulane. Those are at the group of six level, and that's fine. We can talk about that another time, or maybe a little bit here. Those are two pretty strong programs. I would say historically, Troy has been very strong in the Sun Belt. Maybe the lower level before that, but like we've seen the Trojans have success under Jon Sumrall. We've seen them have success last year in year two under Jared Parker. I mean, I think they played JMU in the Sun Belt Championship. They didn't win, but they were there. Uh, Larry Blakeney's an all-time head coach there. Neil Brown had a lot of success there at Troy. Troy may be smaller, but Troy's a very, very good college football program in the mid-major G6 level. As far as Tulane is concerned, they're at a very interesting part here. They've had moments where they were good, like maybe the late 90s. Obviously, when they were back in the SEC in the 40s and 50s and what have you, they kind of de-emphasized athletics a little bit, but they really turned it on under Willie Fritz, and then Jon Sumrall kind of built upon that with Darian Mensah, Jake Retzlaff at quarterback. I think Tulane's going to be a massive regression candidate because I think promoting Will Hall from within was a terrible hire. You should have hired Shannon Dawson, but that's good for Miami. I think like he's going to find out very quickly that the Florida job is unforgiving. Like you got to be special to win big time here. Look, Florida's a blue blood. Florida's a traditional power. But all their success, for the most part, is centered around two coaches, and Steve Spurrier in the 90s to very early 2000s, and Urban Meyer in the mid to late 2000s. They had Dale Dickey. They've had other coaches in the past as well who've had success. Like Doug Dickey. There's another coach. I'm blanking on his name. Hall of Fame level coach. But you weren't winning SEC championships. You weren't winning national titles. You had a Heisman candidate with Spurrier when he was played there in the 60s. You invented Gatorade. This is also a program where like the basketball program is on fire. Women's program is apparently terrible. Didn't know that. Baseball's really good. But like, Scott Strickland's here as your AD. You got to try to figure this out because you're replacing a former head coach who had a lot of success at the G6 level in Louisiana and Billy Napier with another G6 head coach who had a lot of success in Louisiana and Jon Sumrall. Granted, Tulane's a better job than U of L, but like it is what it is. I mean, U of L, you can win games there too. We clearly saw that there with Billy Napier. And that's why he's going to have success at JMU because, again, that's a program that runs itself. Like maybe even more so than Tulane and Troy. Like everybody has success there. Kurt Signetti, Mike Houston, Bob Chesney. Like you keep going. Like I would expect Billy Napier to have JMU in and around the playoff at least once in the next 4 years. Like they're built for it. What I think with Florida is look, I don't necessarily know if Waters really found its level in the new SEC. Florida won the SEC East when Georgia wouldn't win it in the wake of Tennessee pulling back. South Carolina won at one time. I don't think anybody else ever did. Mizzou won a couple times, but that was a weird thing. Kentucky never did. Vanderbilt never did. Um, and then you're looking at it like how do we rank up, with our rivals? You're still clearly behind Georgia. Kentucky is a mess, but you can take advantage of that. South Carolina's chaotic. You can take advantage of that too. Tennessee is about as good as you. They're probably a little bit better and more stable because Josh Heupel's been there for longer. But I think Summerall is a better head coach across the board. And again, that'll play out in the football field in due time. Lane Kiffin's now at LSU. That creates some interesting wrinkles there as well. And then you got the 9 game schedule. You're not going to play Miami very regularly, but you still play Florida State annually, and you got the leg up here. So maybe you can do better than what Billy Napier did. But of course, it's got to click with these new guys. You bring Brad White over from Kentucky. You bring Buster Faulkner to be your OC over from Georgia Tech. You bring Aaron Philo over from Georgia Tech to be your quarterback. Aaron Philo and Buster Faulkner have a rapport. They've worked together in Atlanta the last couple of years, but I mean, Haynes King was the starter there for the Jackets. And DJ Lagway still was just more talented than Aaron Philo. And he's a Baylor now. He's Baylor legacy, and that makes sense. But like you got to have patience here at Florida. You're not going to be winning the SEC a year two because there's so many programs that are so far ahead of you. Like Georgia's running itself. Texas runs itself. A&M's about there. Bama's in a little bit of a weird spot, as is Ole Miss, but Oklahoma and LSU are really strong. Tennessee's been a playoff team before. Mizzou is going to probably get in at some point. Vanderbilt's coming off its best year ever, but they'll pull back. And then obviously South Carolina is about to fire its head coach. Arkansas already did. Mississippi State, you kind of got to make it happen there with Jeff Lebby, but they play really hard for him. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else in the SEC that I haven't touched on. I think I touched on just about everybody. And then Auburn's Auburn. The job's challenging. This is a very difficult job at Florida. And look, Summerall had options. Auburn wanted him. Arkansas wanted him. Kentucky wanted him. I think Florida State potentially wanted him too if they could afford him. But he chose Florida. And he's betting on himself. And he's been tremendously successful. And I'll say this, Cody and I have raved about Jon Sumrall at the G6 level the entire time we've been doing the show, like all 3 seasons. 23, 24, 25. Like we've said nothing but like good things about Jon Sumrall. And I think we're bullish on what he could do at Florida. But also we know what that job can do. The job can devour you alive. And on that note, let's get out of here with some 4 for 4. Um, this is kind of fun. Apparently the Miami RedHawks, went 31-0 during the regular season out of the MAC. There's been some debate if Travis Steele's team deserves to make the NCAA tournament, even if they don't win the MAC championship. I think they do. There's 68 teams here. You can have two MAC teams if they don't win their league. It's fine. That probably makes things problematic for teams like Auburn and Indiana who are right around the bubble. And again, are going to be having our March Madness, college football March Madness bracket here this time next week. It's going to be absolutely dumb. It's going to be so good. It's one of the best things we ever do on the show. Get ready for that. But I actually have more college basketball knowledge this year because my roles changed and I write about it a little bit more frequently. So what I'm going to do is like, what team in each Power Four league in football do I think is the most likely to go 12-0? Like the most likely to go undefeated. And look, last year we saw two teams do that in the Big Ten with Indiana and Ohio State. I don't think anybody did in the SEC. I don't think anybody did in the Big 12. Nobody did in the ACC. G5, I don't think they did either. So those are the only two teams there. And then Ohio State lost to Indiana in the Big 12 championship. Indiana ran the gauntlet and went 16-0. So again, I've got a team that I think is going to could do it, and then I've got a team that I think could do it if that team fails. So let's get started with the ACC. First team here is going to be Miami. Very navigable schedule. You got Florida A&M, Central Michigan, Notre Dame. I think that's your non-conference games here. You're you got to play Clemson on the road, but you got to bye right after that. And Central Michigan's before. If you hone in there, I think you can win that. You got to play at Notre Dame, and that's a challenging thing. And I think if you win that game, the chances of you going undefeated are pretty good. Duke at home after that game could be challenging, but like, look, you don't play SMU, you don't play Louisville. I'm trying to think who else on here. Depending how you feel about Georgia Tech, you don't play them either. And Georgia Tech has always given Miami trouble. So I think that like for what Miami's got to navigate, this is a schedule they can go 11-1 with, maybe 12-0. If they go 12-0, they're going to be a top three seed in playoff. So very bullish on them. The other team that I had that intrigued me a lot out of the ACC, believe it or not, it's NC State. I can't believe I'm doing it. I can't believe I'm effing doing it. But like the Wolfpack, they just have a way of pulling me in. They're the ACC equivalent of Mizzou. When you trust them, they let you down. When you don't pay attention to them, they overachieve. So they got a very navigable schedule. They play God, they play Virginia and Brazil. That's insane. Um, you got to play at Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's going to pull back. You also got Richmond and App State in the non-conference. You host Louisville, which I think is clutch. You host Wake, which I think is huge. You host Cal. You host Duke. You do got to finish the year back to back at Florida State and North Carolina, but those aren't good teams. And I think because you don't play Miami, like NC State's schedule is largely a joke. I do think that the Virginia is going to be good. I think Louisville is going to be good. And we'll see how we feel about Cal, Duke, and Vanderbilt. Syracuse isn't good as well. I mean, that's with a quarterback like CJ Bailey, like they can win 10 games. I mean, it would not shock me if it's Miami versus NC State in the ACC championship game. They got something going pretty good right there. So move on to the Big Ten. And I can't believe I'm doing this here. The first team that I think could actually do it's Indiana. It's insane. Because I think there's only a handful of teams in the Big Ten that could make the playoff. I think Indiana's about a lock, even with Josh Hoover, who I have my doubts about. Okay, you play North Texas, Howard, and Western Kentucky in the non-conference. Whoop-de-doo, Basil. You do have to play at Michigan right after hosting Ohio State. You can pull that off. You host USC. You do got to play at Washington, though, which I think is challenging, but you don't play Oregon. And I think honestly, like the Michigan Indiana game is the one of great consequence here because like whoever wins that game, like if Indiana wins, the chances of them going undefeated are very strong, assuming they beat Ohio State. If Michigan wins that game, the chances of them making the playoff go up considerably. Got to feel very strongly about that one. And then looking at the other team that I would keep an eye on, how about USC? You got San Jose State, Fresno State, and Louisiana all at home in the non-conference. You host Oregon, you host Washington, you host Ohio State. You do got to play in Bloomington at Indiana, but that's off of a bye. You got other road games at Rutgers, at Penn State, at Wisconsin, and then at UCLA, but that's right down the road. You're in a decent spot there. And well, even though I think you do play the upper crust of your league, with Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, I feel like I'm missing somebody else. Michigan. Actually, you don't play Michigan, but you play Washington. There's a pathway where they could do it because I think look, Michigan's schedule is brutal. I think Oregon's is challenging as well. Like if I look at Oregon, it's like, yeah, you got to play Boise, you got to play at USC, you got to play at Illinois, you got to play at Ohio State, you got to play Michigan, Washington, like that. That's not easy for the Ducks. But I think Indiana. I don't know if anybody in the Big Ten is going to do it this year, and Ohio State's got a challenging schedule as well. But Indiana's probably the most likely, and USC has an outside shot. Let's look at the Big 12. The first team is very obvious. It's got to be Texas Tech. Abilene Christian, Oregon State, and Sam Houston, the non-conference. Um, you host Arizona State. You host Houston. You host you host Arizona. I mean, if you're looking at the schedule there for Texas Tech, like you don't play Utah, you don't play BYU. There's somebody else of note in this league as well that I can think of, but I really like Texas Tech chances of going undefeated this year because West Virginia was bad. Oklahoma State was bad. I think Baylor and TCU are very close to firing their head coaches potentially. I don't trust Scott Satterfield at all. Colorado stinks. Oregon State's awful. Like your schedule's incredibly weak, but Texas Tech's just a really strong team. They're going to take advantage of that. The other one that I think could potentially do it, and I think who did I put down as second there? I think Utah's got an outside shot at it too. Idaho, Arkansas, and Utah State all at home in the non-conference. Um, you host BYU. You do got to play at Arizona, which I think is probably a sneaky tough game. That stretch of Houston at Cincinnati, home for BYU and at Arizona, that's difficult as well. But again, you don't play Texas Tech and you don't play Arizona State. Um, I think that you've got some opportunities to really get some pellets on the wall with Houston, BYU, and Arizona. I think those are all going to be higher end teams. Again, I think Iowa State pulls back a little bit because why would you not? Matt Campbell's gone, even though I think Jimmy Rogers is good. And then the SEC. Let's go to that is the wrong link. Bias aside, Georgia's got a really good shot. Okay, so your non-conferences, Tennessee State, Western Kentucky, and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, I think, is a massive pullback candidate. So you are playing a 9-game SEC schedule. Arkansas is not very good. You host Oklahoma, you host Vanderbilt. You do got to play at Bryant-Denny, but I think Alabama, you beat Alabama last year in the rematch. I think Crimson Tide's clearly worse than you. You host Auburn. Auburn doesn't win at Georgia ever. The cocktail party is actually going to be in Atlanta this year because I think it's Atlanta and then it's going to be in Tampa while they renovate Everbank Stadium there in Jacksonville. You do have a tough road date at Ole Miss, but who knows what they're going to be at that point in the year. Mizzou and then at South Carolina. Again, you don't play Texas. You don't play Texas A&M. You don't play LSU. I think that works. You don't play Tennessee. I think that works out pretty well for you. And then the other one I think for the SEC is probably Texas. That's the team that I think has an outside shot at it. Again, okay, Texas State, Ohio State, UTSA in the non-conference. You do host Ohio State. You got a road game at Neyland. You got Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. Florida, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State are all at DKR. You do got to play at LSU and you do got to play at Kyle Field and Mizzou as well. You host Arkansas. I think if the team is as talented as we claim it is, and we believe that Texas could potentially be, you win those games. And I think a year ago, we're You got clobbered by Georgia on the road. You couldn't beat Florida. You struggled. You struggled in all three of the games you needed to win. Your schedule's a little bit more navigable, and I think honestly your team grew a lot from that. And I think that they could do it. I think the fact they don't play Georgia certainly helps them as well in that regard. I would say if I had to pick any of those eight teams that I mentioned here, whether that's Miami, NC State, Indiana, USC, Texas Tech, Utah, Georgia, or Texas. The two that I think could actually go undefeated with their schedules are Miami and Texas Tech. I think that those are probably the most feasible. Yeah, Georgia's going to be really strong, as is Texas, but you still have to beat a couple of tough games because that's just the nature of the beast of the SEC. Indiana may have it in them as well. I don't know if NC State or USC really have that built-in equity at this point. Utah might, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. I don't know. Who knows? Let's get out of here. And this was episode 257 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter at X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams, at the Sizzle20. You can go follow along with the show on Twitter, the X at CFE False Start, like, rate, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Anywhere there's podcasts, give us a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts, really helps the show grow. I got it in the loop there and just got in my head. You can also pay us on Buzzsprout. We got the link there on our YouTube page, along with our link to our three Twitter accounts. Mine, Cody's, then the show's itself. So like, go on there, give us a banana emoji, give us a rocket emoji, give us a star. You can give us whatever you want. Just give us some money because it's fun. Inflation's a bitch. Then that's how that goes. Yeah, Cody's gonna be back on the program here midweek. We're gonna have a 311 themed episode. I know we've done JLM with 311 in the past, but each segment is gonna be 311 themed. And then the following episode, I think this time next week's gonna be our college football March Madness bracket. Getting really good here. Spring ball is right around the corner. I'm going to be going to Germany in a month. It's going to be absolutely wild. It's going to be a great time. Once again, thanks for listening, and this is False Start.